Hey, what's going on, crypto people? It is the Crypto Siege with another day in the life, in the crazy life that is the digital asset space. What is going on, guys? Happy Saturday to you. Good morning. Came across a very interesting article. Heard of this guy. Wanted to share a couple of blogs that he shared with us. Really interesting perspective. We're going to check him out a little bit. I've heard his name being thrown out amongst the XRP community before. I want to go over this guy's name is JC Collins. He has a blog and website called the philosophymetrics.com. So we're going to check that out. Interesting, and the reason why I really wanted to go over this article because it dates back to 2018, and so we can really look into it, delve deep into it. It's fairly long read. So please forgive me, but it's going to really give us a good idea of where we are today and how it makes sense. And a lot of what he speaks of in that article, if we've been paying attention, and like I know we have, this community, it really make a lot of sense. So good morning to you guys. We're going to look into that. Got going on. TJ Jackson's in the building first, my friend. What's up with you, TJ? Good to see you. Jojo Wave, what's going on, Jojo? When Mullet is in the building. How are you, When Mullet? XRP Gal, hey, C's. Good morning to you, miss. How are you? XRP Benno, good morning, XRP fam. Good morning, XRP. Good to see you, brother. Jackie 33. Wow, good morning, guys. Good to see you on the stream, miss. The ladies of crypto. Jackie 33. Gal. Rashawn B. Wealthy is in the building, guys. What's going on, Rasheem? It's a good morning. Happy Saturday to everyone. Came across this article, and I remember I was on this guy's site a few times back last year. And interesting guy. I know anyone bought pancakes. Absolutely. Love some pancakes right now. Yeah, everything's closed down. Our gyms are shut down. Interesting thing. I heard some interesting stuff. I want to cover some bank closures. And has anyone really been thinking about the bank closures? So when Mullet, please don't let me forget to talk about the bank closures, because I'll get them rambling on and I'll forget about it. I know you'll keep me on point, brother. Interesting times going on right now, and it's such a distraction. I gotta tell you, the beer code is such a distraction to what I believe is ultimately, and I think most of us believe is ultimately going on. I'm gonna talk about that as well. The bank closure. So we shall see. We shall see. I actually just had pancakes with the kids, TJ Jackson says. Good for you, bro. Good for you. XRP number 1 is in the building. Afternoon Siege and all. Jackie 33, totally. Really. Bank closures. All right, guys. So I'm going to go over this article today. Yep. I'm going to go over this article from Philosophy of Metrics. Let me share my screen. Hey, guys, do me a favor. Hit the likes. If you didn't get a chance to do that on the way in, it's no worries. Just collapse the chat. Go smash the likes and come back and head out. And do me a favor. Share this on Twitter or your favorite social media outlet. We're on a race to 3,000 subs, to 5,000 subs rather. Let's make that happen. I want to get that done. Some interesting. I had some inside info as well. When Mullet, please remind me to share my inside info. I gotta share the banks and inside info also. I'm gonna call this dude out if he's not right. I will be getting back at him if he's not right. Oh wow, really? Oh, that sucks, TJ Jackson. We have officially had our first confirmed case here in Greenville. MS, is that Mississippi? I'm sorry to hear that, bro. Crypto Delivery is in the building. What's up, everyone? How are you? So let me change this view, go over this article. Interesting read. Again, please be patient as we go through, because I think it's really, really important to cover every bit of it, every single sentence. And what I would like for you guys to think about is how relevant, or how much of what was written back then in 2018 today makes sense, and has already happened, or is making sense that would happen today. Life is great, crypto delivery. Good to see you. Yeah, Mississippi. Gotcha. XRP Joe's in the building. What's going on, XRP Joe? Good to see you. Good to see you still doing your thing with your YouTube channel, brother. Change his view. Again, I came across this guy for before, yeah, sometime last year. I can't remember where, but I'm gonna go over this, and then I'll go over about. But it's a very well renowned, I guess, in the financial space. Guy's name is J.C. Collins, and he writes about a lot of different things, does talks and stuff like that as well. This is titled XRP the Standard, and I'm pretty sure someone has covered this in the past, but I wanted to cover it because I think it's probably more appropriate today, more so than ever. So XRP the Standard by J.C. Collins, and this is September of 2018. He actually had another article in July of 2018 about the geopolitics of XRP. So USD is covered in this article, the SDR, economic collapse, sovereign debt. Very, very, very important topic, and I think it's something that we really need to pay more attention to, start covering more, because in the end, this is what I believe it's all about: sovereign debt. China, Russia, SWIFT, and SEP. So again, forgive me, guys. It's a fairly lengthy read, but I think it's really important to cover every single. Yeah, that is a long. Every single, and trust me, it does get to XRP. Wow, that is a long read. All right, guys, I'm gonna try to read fast. So here we go, guys. I hope you got some cup of coffee, and if you had some breakfast, you definitely want to have some coffee now, so you stay awake. All right, so the fear of this is again September of 2018, guys. The fear of an economic collapse is a constant emotion which spans across financial demographics and business news cycles. Everything from sovereign debt pressures to currency wars, with trade wars sprinkled in for good measure, are leveraged as potential sparks for the next crisis. Over the last 5 years, I have made a reasonable case that central bank monetary policies around quantitative easing and the subsequent quantitative tightening or normalization of monetary policy would not lead to the dollar collapse and economic turmoil so that many had been predicting. He said it would not lead to that. 18. There has been much written about the QE response to the financial crisis of 2008 and the inevitable normalization of those policies which would follow. But let's just focus on the basic economics to help us understand the broader impact of these policies and the direction of the world now appears to be taking as a response to the last crisis. Economist Robert Triffin developed an economic theory around the inherent conflict which develops when a national or political credit-based currency, such as the US dollar, is used in an international reserve function, which is what we have today, right? The domestic and international responsibilities of such a currency are in opposition to one another and create an ever-escalating monetary imbalance, which has an impact on the entire global structure Triffin stated that America would have to carry a current account deficit in order to maintain the dollar's de facto global reserve position. When we consider that America went from having the world's largest trade surplus at the end of World War II to now having the world's largest trade deficit, we can't help but follow Robert Triffin's reasoning to the same conclusion. There could be more to the story, though, and Triffin's theory may have been flawed. On a base fundamental level, the theory is stable and proven accurate when correlated with real-world events. But on a more complex level, the theory may not be as applicable. We will explore this later in the article when we consider the realignment on trade deals being mandated under the Trump doctrine. This is one of the things that my dude told me, one of the inside things that was going on. One of the inside scoop info was that realignment on trade deals. The Triffin paradox, as it became known, has been one of the most widely cited bodies of economic theory in the last half century. Triffin accurately predicted that a widening international use of the US dollar, along with a gold shortage, would eventually lead to a run on US gold holdings. Haven't we been seeing lately that gold and silver the last 3 or 4 days has been significantly hard to come across? The fact that this indeed happened in the 1960s and eventually led to President Nixon's closing the gold window in 1971 gave the Triffin paradox foundational support with most economists. The original Bretton Woods agreement was a partial gold standard, non-domestic convertibility, and in essence ended in 1971. But the international role of the US dollar only increased further as OPEC agreed to transact all global energy sales in American dollars. The IMF, one of the institutions created at Bretton Woods in 1944, alongside the World Bank and World Trade Organizations, created a supra-sovereign asset called Special Drawing Right in 1969. The SDR was developed as an alternative measure to provide financial assistance or liquidity to nations who found themselves on the wrong end of the growing global imbalances. The Bretton Woods institutions and the monetary and financial policies which followed were purposed with the task of managing the US dollar-centered framework. The institutions worked hand in hand with the Federal Reserve and other central banks around the world to ensure the balances were managed through exchange rate arrangements and domestic interest rate policies, which more served the international objectives as opposed to the domestic needs of any specific nation. Very important to note that it was more about the international objectives. The SDR from inception was built as a value composition to the top global reserve currencies. This is an important distinction. The SDR is not supported by a basket of currencies. It is, in fact, the basket. No basket, no SDR. It is an alternative reserve asset, which is not a currency, but it does serve as a claim on currency held by IMF members. We'll come back to the SDR further down. On December 11, 2001, China was admitted to the World Trade Organization. America's trade deficit with China began to increase at a faster pace from this point. Outside of the Federal Reserve itself, China is the largest holder of U.S. debt. Most economists and financial analysts consider this to be an advantage which China holds over America, but such is not the case. This widely misunderstood dynamic between both extreme spectrums within the global system of imbalances has caused the People's Bank of China to explode a domestic credit market which could implode under a strengthening US dollar. And my understanding as of today, the dollar is for some odd reason getting stronger, and China's credit situation is absolutely about to implode. The best method of understanding the situation, we all know about the Cook numbers and the fake numbers that China has been given out to the world. The best method of understanding this situation is to use a simple example. And I love this example. If I owe you $100, that is my problem. But if I owe you over $1 trillion, that is your problem. China has a huge problem which is straining its domestic capital markets and preventing it from fully opening those capital markets to international investors. Again, guys, dated 2018 in September. The internationalization of the renminbi or yuan needs to progress in order for China to strengthen the foundations of its huge economic growth. The continuation of the Chinese miracle is not a guarantee, and the domestic economy could implode and cause a revolution within the country. I'm getting some, that's kind of already happening in China. Does that sound far-fetched with a question mark? Consider that the Chinese people have a regular history of rising up and overthrowing dynasties and incompetent rulers. The centralized government in Beijing is aware of this and has built its socio-economic model around the need to develop its vast rural population into a middle class which can consume material goods. The expansive ghost cities of China, which have been built around the country, were meant to house 100 million rural peasants as the new middle class. This could still happen, but it will depend on the outcome of the trade realignment taking place with America. More that soon. On March 23rd, 2009, as a response to the financial crisis, the government of the People's Bank of China, I can't pronounce that, published a paper titled Reform the International Monetary System. Zhao was putting forward the idea of reforming the IMF, this is in 2009, and SDR as an alternative to the Bretton Woods USD based framework. This is from the paper. The desirable goal of reforming the international monetary system, therefore, is to create an international reserve currency that is disconnected from individual nations and is able to remain stable in the long run, thus removing the inherent deficiencies caused by using credit-based national currencies. Though the super sovereign reserve currency has long since been proposed, yet no substantive progress has been achieved to date. Back in the 40s, Keynes had already proposed to introduce an international currency unit named Bancor based on the value of 30 representative commodities. Unfortunately, the proposal was not accepted. The collapse of the Bretton Woods system, which was based on the white approach, indicates that the Keynesian approach may have been more far-sighted. The geopolitics of XRP for different information. So you can read the article on the geopolitics of XRP for more information on that approach. So the IMF also created the SDR in 1969 when the defects of the Bretton Woods system initially emerged to mitigate the inherent risk sovereign reserve currencies cause. Yet, the role of the SDR has not been put into full play due to limitations on its allocation and the scope of its uses. However, it serves as the light in the tunnel for the reform of the international monetary system. So this person from China wrote this in 2009. A super sovereign reserve currency not only eliminates the inherent risk of credit-based sovereign currency, but also makes it possible to manage global liquidity. A super sovereign reserve currency managed by a global institution could be both used to both create and control the global liquidity. And when a country's currency is no longer used as the yardstick for global trade and as the benchmark for other currencies, the exchange rate policy of the country would be far more effective in adjusting economic imbalances. This will significantly reduce the risk of a future crisis and enhance crisis management capability. And that was from the article from this person from China who wrote that. All right, back to J.C. Collins. The better part of POM's history has been spent understanding these, this is philosophy of metrics, POM, has been spent understanding these proposed reforms, as most of the major players, including some within the U.S. Treasury Department, were promoting the same. The major challenges with elevating the SDR to a true global currency status involve structural changes to the IMF's governance framework. These changes would have reduced American influence over IMF governance, which some within the American establishment disagreed with. As a response to the 2009 paper by Zhao, the members of the IMF developed the 2010 governance and quota reforms. Wow. Though the Obama administration agreed on the reforms at the beginning, America stalled on implementing the changes. A version of these reforms was finally enacted in 2016, around the same time that the Chinese renminbi was added to the SDR composition. The addition of the renminbi to the basket was controversial, as some felt that the Chinese currency had not yet reached a level of internationalization which would provide it the necessary reserve status of other member currencies. The addition should be considered a political move by the IMF against American interests. China desperately needs to diversify its foreign exchange reserve holdings of USD denominated debt. The development of the renminbi denominated financial securities and assets is a strategy to move forward this de-dollarization and internationalization. The onshore and offshore renminbi serves as a barrier to protect China's domestic financial markets from speculation while it promotes international expansion. The New Silk Road Initiative serves as a vehicle for China to expand its influence across the Eurasian continent while building corridors for the renminbi liquidity. But the New Silk Road Initiative, like the continuation of China's domestic growth, is not a guarantee. Emerging nations who have signed on with the New Silk Road Initiative have been burdened with debt to China. And as the USD strengthens under the Trump doctrine, it's not just China which is under risk of experiencing a major credit crisis. A strong US dollar could unravel the whole Eurasian geopolitical strategy, which China and Russia have been engineering years. It is unlikely that Russia is unaware of this. One of the largest challenges with unwinding the dollar standard or the Bretton Woods framework involves the existing exchange rate arrangements. For the most part, it is these very arrangements which have been the biggest contributors to the global imbalances which have developed. The Bretton Woods institutions have structured the exchange rates around the world to accommodate and promote a stable US dollar. As the international supply of USD increased, it was the currencies of the emerging markets which carried the bulk of the inflation. This imbalance became so large that American-made goods became expensive to other nations. American companies moved factories overseas, shifted the whole global supply management framework to the emerging nations. It is the global supply chain management framework which Trump is now attempting to bring back to America through the renegotiation of trade arrangements. Over the years, I have stated that the answer to correcting the global imbalances will be to devalue the US dollar to make American-made goods more affordable to the rest of the world. Again, before I started reading this, I wanted you guys to kind of think about how much of what's in this article seems very, very, very relevant today. How much of it, what I've read in this article, seems like it is in fact playing out today in 2020. This would increase U.S. exports and lead to an overall improvement in GDP. While many focus on the amount of debt, the larger challenge is debt management. As an example, at the end of World War II, the American debt to GDP ratio was substantially higher than it is today. The chart below from the Congressional Budget Office projects the debt to GDP ratio out to 2047, but does not consider the substantial increases to GDP under the Trump doctrine. We should anticipate that this ratio will begin to trend downward in the coming years, which would put America in a stronger position against China. Wonder what that's looking like today. Wonder how much of that is actually true today. Is that in fact changing? The flip side of this argument is that the Chinese renminbi would have to appreciate to reduce exports and decrease its trade surplus. America decreases its trade deficit and China decreases its trade surplus through depreciation and appreciation of domestic currencies. Eventually, the imbalances adjust to a level which accommodates global growth and the expansion of liquidity. But that is only part of the issue. The largest problem in the existing monetary structure is the accumulation of foreign exchange reserves. In particular, is the large accumulation of USD in the foreign exchange reserve accounts of central banks around the world, with China being the largest. Everything written above is a symptom of this one aspect of the existing dollar standard. These reserves are used to support the USD monetary standard and provide the asset offset for central bank liabilities. Composition of these FX reserves vary from nation to nation, but the largest percentage of accounts around the world is made up of USD. Over the last few years, some nations, such as Russia, have been dramatically reducing their holdings of USD. China, for its part, needs to be careful how fast it diversifies its reserves while maintaining a parallel momentum to renminbi internationalization. The Trump strategists know this and just about have China in a checkmate. Whoa. So the Trump strategists know this and just about have China in a checkmate position on trade. And how much of this has been proven out or is relevant today? Beijing will make a deal to prevent a domestic credit implosion and unrest amongst the population. Again, guys, this is from September of 2018. Under the IMF Sovereign Debt Restructuring Mechanism, SDRM, there are multiple paths forward which can be taken. Under the IMF Sovereign Debt Restructuring Mechanism, Nations such as Greece have taken loans from the IMF, which have riddled the country with more restrictions on domestic policies and growth potential. The allocation of SDR quota amounts from member nations was one of the items on the table for reforms back in 2010, as suggested by China and Zhao Chuan, I think is the name. The alternative to the SDRM is a collective action clause. Collective action clauses, or CACs. Both the SDRM and the CAC are highly debated by monetary and financial policymakers around the world. The laws governing CACs differ from New York to London, with no agreeable alignment on the application of those laws. While CACs would benefit the US dollar standard and American interests, the SDRM would serve the interests of the IMF and in turn China, and a broader use of the SDR. Before moving on, we need to have a clear understanding of a reserve currency, a domestic currency, and an opposing example is used for banking and commerce within the economic framework of a nation. It serves the needs of that of the domestic economy, and interest rate adjustments can be used to expand or contract the money supply as needed to maintain inflation and a sustainable level of growth. Reserve currencies, with the USD being the dominant and primary reserve asset, need to meet those domestic accountabilities while also maintaining international responsibilities. As we've discussed, this is where the problem begins. These international responsibilities include the following: serves as a cross-border payment settlement system, provides global liquidity through financial assets and investment products, provides a pricing benchmark for raw commodities, establish an exchange rate pegging mechanism for global trade and commerce. Each of these can be broken into more detailed aspects, but for our purposes here, this simple overview will suffice. Okay, I don't need to do that. So the four functions of reserve currency should be segregated and given to different super sovereign assets. As an example, the function of providing a cross-border payment settlement standard is now incrementally being shifted towards a more effective and efficient model developed by the company Ripple. Read that again. The four functions of a reserve currency should be segregated and given to different supra-sovereign assets. So he's suggesting split up the four and have one particular asset handle one, maybe two, but one. Have each sovereign asset handle the four different aspects, right? As an example, the function of providing a cross-border payment settlement standard is now incrementally being shifted towards a more effective and efficient model developed by the company Ripple. Ripple has built a blockchain distributed ledger technology which can leverage its native digital asset, XRP, to facilitate a cost-effective and almost immediate transaction of cross-border payment settlement. Listen to this, guys. Central banks, large commercial banks, global institutions, and cross-border payment service providers. That's four different entities. Are all beginning the transition to the Ripple technology. The broad integration of XRP into the cross-border payment settlements function would remove, listen to this, guys, would remove a tremendous amount of international pressure from the US dollar. This would allow for an increased reduction of US dollar denominated foreign exchange reserves and begin the process of correcting the monetary policy. So that's three things in one. The integration of XRP into the cross-border payment settlements would function would remove a tremendous amount of pressure, international pressure from the USD. That's one. This would allow for an increased reduction of US denominated foreign exchange reserves, which is what the other nations and the IMF is wanting, and begin the process of correcting monetary imbalances. Three major things in the global economic crisis scenario will be solved with the use of XRP in one facet of the reserve currency role, which is cross-border payments. The moment I grasped what Ripple was building with XRP and the interledger protocol was the moment I understood how it would fit into the international monetary system and why its ascension was inevitable. All right. But this still leaves three other reserve currency functions which needs to be considered. Providing global liquidity through financial assets and investment products is still likely to remain with political credit-based currencies, as each nation will continue to promote the financial products denominated in its own domestic asset. This is how it should remain for the foreseeable future, as a nation's growth and interaction with the international system will be the largest contributor to both global growth and liquidity. Neither the SDR or XRP by themselves or with each other would be able to provide that gigantic amount of global liquidity which will be required to drive the 21st century's growth. National currencies, presumably in a new digital version, let me say it again, national currencies, presumably in a new digital version, will interact seamlessly within the new decentralized crypto-based monetary and financial systems. Again, guys, this was written in 2018, and we all know what happened with the World Economic Forum, the G20, and the UN. Their articles and their posts and articles about this new decentralized crypto-based monetary and financial systems. XRP and Interledger will provide the bridge to transfer value from asset to asset within the system. The SDR could be used to provide the other reserve currency functions, which are currently the responsibility of the USD, providing a benchmark for raw commodities and serving as an exchange rate pegging mechanism to handle the accounting function of a global trade and commerce is something which a broader and more reformed SDR could accommodate. Managing Director of the IMF, Christine Lagarde, has even suggested that a digital version of the SDR could provide greater benefits to the global economy, and for sure, she is right. Based on what we have broken out above, a digital SDR would be the natural evolution for the multi-currency value composition and would integrate within the new crypto-based framework, but its function would be separate from that of XRP. SDR, like other digital assets, would also use XRP. So he is saying that this ESDR was going to be, would also use XRP in the Intl ledger. Okay. So he's suggesting it's not going to be a XRP, but it's going to use XRP and Intl ledger to transfer value. It should be noted that the architecture for this new crypto-based monetary and financial standard is being built now as I type these words. The architecture for this new crypto-based monetary and financial standard is being built now as I type these words. Large commercial banks, stock exchanges, central banks, global institutions, amongst others, are all developing crypto-based extensions of their existing services and products. Don't you find the timing of the bank closures in New York interesting? JP Morgan Chase closing their stuff, and they're saying it's because of the beer code. What about the stock exchanges? Have they recently been kind of closing down? Right? Large commercial banks, stock exchanges, central banks, global institutions, amongst others, are all developing crypto-based extensions of their existing services and products. That kind of leads me to my bank thing. Again, we'll talk about that more. It's no longer, listen to this, guys. It's no longer a question of maybe or hopefully. It is just a matter of developing, validating, and implementing the services and products. With each passing week and month, the world is moving that much closer to the moment of the greatest fulcrum. With the development and validation of the central bank model through the 17th century, few of the average mass population knew what was happening or could even have understood it. A similar pattern is taking place today. This is what we say in the stream all the time. We have to be so careful because this community, the digital assets community, especially the XRP community, just because we know doesn't mean that the masses know. That's why I always say that you and I are playing a game that 99.99% of the masses, they don't even know is being played. And we're winning, by the way. So as over 90% of the population either does not understand what is taking place or has never even heard of the things we just reviewed. Okay, need to cover that. We have covered a lot. We have covered a lot of ground in this article. It is difficult to make a reasonable argument without building a context and a functional understanding of the basis behind the contributing factors. There is one last important piece we must cover before closing this article, and this is around the sovereign debt challenges and the potential use of IMF substitution accounts to address those challenges. An aspect of the SDRM is the use of SDR denominated substitution accounts to reduce pressure related to sovereign debt. The basic principle is that a nation could exchange its large holding of foreign exchange reserves for an allocation of SDR. Considering that America holds the largest amount of debt in foreign accounts, the use of substitution accounts would consolidate America's debt within the IMF itself. And again, I pointed out on a video, a stream or two ago, that it has been noted that the head of the IMF today is very much, I forget her name, Kristalina, is very much aligned in the thoughts and monetary policies that of Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. They're very much aligned. Very much aligned. And then you throw on the fact that just a couple of days ago, it's announced that they just expedited the number 2 position in the IMF, which was an American appointed and backed by Mnuchin appointment to the IMF. 35 years old. I got a sense that this millennial probably knows and has a pretty good understanding of the digital asset space. This is the core reason why American policymakers and legal experts prefer the use of the CAC collective action clauses over the SDRM. But that is not to say there couldn't be a combined use of both strategies. Trump recently made a statement that America could provide loans to other nations. I remember when he said that. This is a substantial statement and provides an indication of the direction America may be going on sovereign debt restructuring. Like with the shift from trade surplus to trade deficit, America went from being the world's largest creditor nation at the end of the war to being the world's largest debtor nation. The Trump doctrine is attempting to unwind that as well, and once again put America in the lead as a stable nation making loans to others. All right, so let me go to this. Oh, yeah, this is really important as well. As such, the parallel consideration of the strategy is that America may want to keep the dollar strong and retain all reserve functions outside of the cross-border payment settlement standard. To be sure, it is the cross-border function which puts the most strain on the dollar, as it contributes to the large expansion of the dollar money supply within the global system and the ever-increasing accumulation in the foreign exchange reserve accounts. To be sure, it is the cross-border function which puts the most strain on the dollar. Have any of you guys been thinking like I've been thinking is why, it seems like these central banks and these world governments and the BIS, everyone else, when it comes to digital assets, they're like blah, 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 blah. But that cross-border thing, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that's something we could start working on right away. You guys notice that? Have you been catching that every single time? Cross-border seems to be first and forefront in their brain, right? All right, this is where the theory of the Triffin breaks down. This is where the theory of Robert Triffin breaks down. How applicable can the deficiencies as defined in the Triffin paradox be when the functions of the reserve currency are segregated? As a whole, the theory is sound, as we described at the beginning. But when considered among the premise of everything we have covered above, aspects of the theory are not as accommodating. As such, I see a continuation of the back and forth between America and the IMF on reforming the SDR and the governance and quota systems. America and the IMF, right? While the expectation was that America would depreciate the US dollar to increase exports and grow its GDP, the Trump doctrine has started to achieve the same goal under the trade renegotiations. Dollar depreciation is Trump's greatest card. Interesting, guys. The dollar depreciation is Trump's greatest card, and he will be unlikely to play it until the last moment. A strong dollar gives America a lot of negotiating leverage as the strain on China and other nations is immense. Does it feel like that once they got the trade deal and the different phases with China done, signed, doesn't it feel like that's when this whole repo thing started going on? I'm wondering if you guys agree with me on that. Let me know in the chat. I feel like that's the timing. That once they got the renegotiations started or signed with China, feels as though that's when the whole thing was kind of going on with the repo and all of that stuff. Remember what JC Collins is saying is the dollar depreciation is Trump's greatest card, and he will be unlikely to play it until the last moment. A strong dollar gives America a lot of negotiating leverage, as the strain on China and other nations is immense. That's when the Donald was doing all his negotiations, when the dollar was highly recognized as being very, very strong. Listen to this. Played strategically and at the right time, dollar depreciation, which in essence would be a renegotiation of the exchange rate arrangements, could spur the American economy to even greater heights of economic growth. Increasing GDP means a more manageable debt to GDP ratio, which means a reduction in America's debt challenges. Reduction in America's debt challenges. No need for fear. An economic crisis is not around the corner, at least not for America. A very important paragraph here, guys. Forgive me again. Unproven claims around developing integrations between Ripple and SWIFT, the existing cross-border settlement service, provide a logical path forward on the transition components of global settlement. We should anticipate that SWIFT will become just one of the thousands of Ripple customers who use XRP and the Interledger protocol to improve efficiency and lower costs. We should anticipate that SWIFT will become just one of the thousands of Ripple customers who use XRP and the Interledger protocol to improve efficiency and lower costs. Eventually, SWIFT may find itself redundant and losing its own customers. But by that time, the whole crypto architecture itself will be functioning at a much larger volume than it is now. Another unproven claim, which has come about recently and actually began back in 2016, is a possible integration between corporate enterprise giant SAP, and Ripple. The World Supply Chain Management System functions on the SAP platform, the World Supply Management System. Wow. Consider that Trump is attempting to shift the World Supply Chain Management function back to America, alongside reducing the role of the USD in the cross-border settlements, and we can begin to see a larger strategy coming into focus around a new standard built on XRP and Interledger. We can speculate with our broad understanding and education, but we will need to wait further for confirmations before making additional. We will need to wait for further confirmations before making additional connections. Though there is no denying a clear pattern is unfolding around both the unwinding of Bretton Woods and the development of an expansive XRP architecture. One not being the replacement of the other, of course, as both are very much different beasts serving very different purposes. Guys, again, forgive me, but I really felt like I had to read every single word in that article. Again, and this is dated in September of 2018, guys. September of 2018. And again, I will ask you this: how much of that do you feel is relevant, makes sense, feels as though it's playing out today in 2020? Because it feels like a lot of it, maybe not all of it, but it feels like a lot from that article written in September of 2018 is playing out today. It really does feel that way. Guy's name is J.C. Collins. Really made a lot of sense to me today, or reading over that article this morning. Yeah, right. I'm gonna make sure I get some of the comments in here. Very, very interesting stuff there. Swift will be one of the thousands of Ripple customers that will use XRP. This was in 2018. How many more people, how much of more of a confirmation is it today that that will be the case than it was back in 2018? Right? So the banks, when Mullet. So my dude was telling me that the banks were going to be closed, tier ones, Friday, obviously Saturday, and Monday. So tier ones, that feels like the JP Morgan Chases of the worlds. And it's interesting because it didn't feel like it happened all over the world, like in terms of all over the country, in terms of branches. But what about in the financial hub? A financial hub, most would probably consider that to be New York. Right? And so, and the reason my guy is saying that this is the reason for these closures was to be implementing the new quantum financial system, real-time payment system, which RGP is part of that. And I'm wondering if JP Morgan Chase, for example, that closed like what, over 1,000, maybe 1,200 branches in New York, and it used the word temporarily in there. But they gave first of all, it's temporary. So it wasn't a closure necessarily to lay off and to look, we don't need these branches, right? Because of everything's going to be digital. It said temporarily, but of course they used the beer code. It's the reason for that. So I'm really curious as to see how many of these quote unquote tier one banks, and I'm guessing those would be the Goldman Sachs and the JP Morgan Chases of the world. I'm guessing, perhaps even Bank of America in New York. But how many of those major New York banks closed Friday and are going to be closed on Monday as well, using the beer code? Did not the stock exchange kind of temporarily? I mean, did they close or just change their hours? Did they go strictly? Someone said, well, that's fine because 80% of what they do is basically online anyway or whatever, right? But it did happen. It did happen. It happened. So could that possibly be like JC Collins is saying in his article that was more about putting in the changes necessary? Don't you find it oddly strange that Brad Garlinghouse out of nowhere just announced to the world that Ripple was no longer a software company selling software to banks, but now they were a blockchain infrastructure company? I thought that was really interesting to know. The guys, that is a really great article. I definitely encourage you guys to check that out. Did you put that link in the description, Win Mullet? I thought I saw that. GOXLP is in the building. What's going on, man? Global Funds Exchange. So Win Mullet says someone posted this in Kimes' stream. Breaking news, March 20th. GFX systems that banks use went down all day and are still down. Global Funds Exchange. Thank you, Win Mullet. I appreciate that, brother. Yeah. And my dude had also pointed out to me and told me that this exchange rates had been negotiated with the new dollar. Now he says it's a U.S. Treasury note. They might call it the USN. U.S. Treasury notes. Doesn't it seem like today all indications that they're going to be doing stuff now? The system is going to be run through the Treasury, and they're calling it the U.S. Treasury note. So interesting. So Global Funds Exchange, all systems, GF systems that banks use went down today. Now this guy is kind of big into currencies and currency exchanges and different things like that. But I find the timing of that interesting. That's an interesting point there, Win Mullet. Thank you for sharing that. TJ Jackson, that's a great point. Think of it with an entrepreneurial mind. Would you incorporate this tech into your business? I definitely would. Exactly. Nunya Benz, how you doing, my friend? Hey, Crypto Seeds, good vibes as always. Watching the live stream today. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you being here. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please hit the subscribe button. Ring that notification bell, my friend. Again, I'd ask you how much of that article dated in 2018, in September 2018, seems to have played out, feels like it's more relevant today. Feels like it's relevant today. When you think about it. A lot of it to me really does. Sway Z, what's going on, brother? Very interesting. Yeah, that was interesting. Again, this is in 2018, so I would ask you, doesn't it seem like a lot of that has played out or is playing out as we speak? Because I do feel as though, they had the whole negotiations going on with China and the U.S. and they're going on all this stuff, but we also kept getting news about how all the other nations' currencies were going on there, but the U.S. dollar was strong. U.S. dollar was strong. U.S. dollar was strong, right? They kept putting that out there on mainstream media, right, during this negotiation time, right, with China. U.S. dollar strong. Other nations are in trouble, but the U.S. dollar strong. Then it feels like as soon as they got the deals done, within a matter of 2 or 3 weeks, we start hearing about this whole stuff with the repo market. Like, in other words, it feels as though now they're starting to try to depreciate the U.S. dollar. It feels like that now. Does it not? Does it not? Doesn't it feel like that's what they're trying to do right now? Depreciate the US dollar? Don't you find it very interesting that this guy, JC Collins from the philosophyofmetrics.com, said that the depreciation of the dollar was Trump's ace in the hole? It was his car, but he has to wait to play it until the last moment? Does that sound like that perhaps we are in the last moment today as we speak? Feels like it. Really does feel like it. Again, I apologize for the long read, but I felt like just about every single word. I didn't even read every single paragraph in there. Really needed to be stated so that we can kind of see where we are. It's so funny too because I've always said on the stream, Trust me when I say that the Donald has a plan, right? And I've also said that I cannot see it in my heart of hearts, in my brain. I cannot see how the Donald is going to let the President Donald Trump, the great US of A company that is Ripple, and their digital asset, XRP, I can't see how he's going to just let that slip through his fingers. I can't see it. I don't see a scenario where he lets that slip. I really can't. All right, guys, listen, I'm going to wrap up this stream. I appreciate you guys hanging out with me on a Saturday morning. It's been really, really cool to hang out with you guys. Looking forward. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to see you sometime later today as well. What a cool hangout. Guys, we are so close. We really, really are. And if anyone can share a confirmation of banks like JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, perhaps being closed Friday and or Monday, that would be really, really cool. Please let us know. Yeah, inside info. So that was one. One was the bank closures, when Mullet. And the other inside info, the banks closing, the tier one. And at first I was looking at it and thinking like, no, there was no bank closure, but it happened in New York. So the bigger banks closing. Also, talked about the exchange rates 2 or 3 weeks ago having been renegotiated when I mentioned that on the stream as well. Interesting how JC Collins points out the same thing. The exchange rate and the renegotiation of trade is basically the same thing. Right? Basically the same thing. So I don't know. What are the levels of these martial laws? And my understanding from this guy is that we're at level 4. We're at level 4. Saw on Twitter today that these mobilizations by the military is happening in 28 states. 28 states. Absolutely, TJ Jackson. I'll share that with you. Thank you, Win Mullet. I appreciate that. When Mullet, all banks are closing their lobbies, drive-throughs are open. And again, is this because of the implementation of the quantum financial system, the real-time payments? And the deflection is the beer code. Is that the case? I don't know. I think there's 5 GeoXRP. Are you talking about martial law? I think there's 5. Right? So is, the moves that they're making, and that's a great point, for now, it could be that, right? But the escalation or the appearance of an escalation, right? Give that appearance of an escalation. They're escalating what they do in reference to the beer code. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So okay. Great. Perfect. I get it. There's more cases now. Okay. Great. Yes, more cases. So we have to increase the level of the closures, right? We have to increase the level of closure. So it's not just drive-through, just closed. Could that be it? Could that be the reason? They use the beer code as a distraction, and they implement the new system. We shall see. Babakov says it's already in place. All right, guys, listen, thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate it big time. It's been a great hangout. Hope you guys get a chance to read that out or check it out for yourselves. Do some homework for yourselves. See if it resonates for you the same way as it really resonates for me. It's been awesome hanging out, guys. Never, ever forget this. Old money doesn't want you to win. They don't want us to win. They would rather us remain a cog in their perpetual wheel of trading our time for dollars. They don't want us to play in the same playground that they play in, where we allow our money to work for us. This is our chance to win, guys. The digital asset space is our chance to win. We are in the midst of the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of man. Are you participating? Or are you standing on the sidelines? Here's what I do know, that the battle for you has already been fought, and the victory is yours. Go get it. I'll talk to you soon, guys. See ya. Bye. GeoXRP, is that right? ODL upgrade? GeoXRP ODL upgrade? Huh. Interesting. Nice. All right, guys. Take care. Have a great weekend.